Okay, let's get the text here. Mm, you got the pay vav. Let me just see here. Um, um, share screen. Okay, so pay vav. It's a fascinating piece, really a fascinating piece. Um, come actually, Kinyan Adam. Anything which is from the Kinyan of a person. Ishto, one of Avdo, Vamosa, Vishor, Chamoro, his slaves, male and female, his oxen, his donkeys, all of the caspo, his tent, his silver, the zavo, and his gold, the chol shelo, anything which he holds. Hakol hu mishoresh nafsho. Everything is from the shoresh of his nefesh. In other words, everything which you with you own in this world has a connection to your nefesh. I saw once in a Breslover book, I don't remember which book it was, or some pamphlet in which I think they're not, whether they say, and I don't know what their sources say, it's not just stuff which you own, it's stuff with which you come into contact. There's some sort of connection to Shorosh Neshama, otherwise how would you come into contact with it? But Tzadok is not going that far here. He's saying that everything which you possess, it's all from the shorish of your nefesh. Ki kol hadomem tzomech chai, that tzach is Rashi tables, abbreviation for inanimate object, the plant world, and the animal kingdom. Mishurashayim shim nefesh adam, they are rooted in the soul of a person. Shorish kusumi menu, and the source of their life force is from him. Kanoda. So they go as he goes. Umashu lo, and that which he whole actually owns. And Reb Tzaddik is going to speak about not like the rest of the things you come into contact with, but something else he's going to go into. So in the end, I think they probably agree, as we'll see in a few moments. But right, it says lo, that which is acquired by you, that you actually own. It's that the source of the chiyus is from you. Uh, uh, so the idea is that there's some connection. And even though he says, you're like your wife and your children who you don't really own, right? There's a connection there. It's a powerful connection, and you have an influence on them. I think it's vice versa as well. I think since they have free will and they have neshamos, they have an influence on you too. So I don't think it's just one directional, even though it seems to be really the assumption the inference here of what Reb Tzaddik is saying, but I think it's bi-directional, works in both directions. You influence them, they influence you. Okay, so there is this, I think in the English fancy term is that a symbiotic relationship and a mutual influence. So the reason why you're given these connections, as it's saying that best for a book which I saw, is that you have to be a tikkun, which you have to do with these things. You're put into contact with these things, certainly the things you own, and because there's some tikkun you have to make with them. And evidently, also, it's not just a tikkun, but it's influence. They're influenced by you, and that's why it's going to bring down. I think here the famous Gemara later on about the animals of the person that they certainly the animals is going to be down. The donkey Pinchas Ben Yair will not eat stuff from which Shumas and Mitzvahs are not taken. Right? The donkey is still a donkey, but it's the donkey of Pinchas Ben Yair. So it's only this Pinchas Ben Yair devolves on the donkey as well. The Kinyan Shem Hefker. So like, okay, we got a problem, a theological problem here, which is the stuff in the world which is Hefker. It isn't owned by any Jew. And if, Jews are supposed to own and influence things in this way in which they bring them more kedusha and they serve for Hashem, that individual as well. What about everything which doesn't have an owner yet in this world? So it says, Shem Afker, like all the animals in the forest, he says, it's because you haven't fixed everything I gave you yet, so we can't give you more stuff to fix. So therefore, which is an interesting thing, because the implication would be that a person's rich is given more things to own because he's able to fix more things. I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think the person could be rich and own lots of things and fall short on many of the things which he was supposed to fix. But I'm sorry to say that which is things which are not owned by, this is really a good piece for anti-Semites. It says that things to that which things which are not owned yet by Jews, it's only because we haven't gotten around to them yet. And really we should be owning them and using them L'Shem Shemayim the right way. They definitely are connected to people. Not in a revealed way, not in a full way, but there are some connection. And it says in the eventual future, Vigars even kevis, that wolves will live together with lambs. How is that going to be? It's against nature. But once the people are fixed, so the fixing extends even to the animals. And people don't fight with each other, then animals are not going to fight with each other. It's an amazing concept. So he says, and even the nachash, before the Chet on Rishon, the nachash is, Chazal said the nachash was supposed to be a servant of Adam. It says, the test on base. The Chet caused the nachash to break away from Adam and become independent. And of course, nachash lost out by that as well. But the point is that everything, even the nachash, which seems to be the Aviyavos Hatuma, the most problematic creature of all, he too was supposed to be subject to and under control and for the use and for the tikkun of Adam and Rishon. And now says Tzadok, okay, all these things. Why have I established this? We've already mentioned this now. Just like a person is, so to the things he owns take on the flavor, they take on the character of the person. He says, says the animals of Tzaddikim, Kodesh doesn't cause them to stumble. Even though Apidin, there's no reason why a chamor has to dafka specifically eat stuff from which Chumas and Mice is taken off. A donkey is a donkey, is Amchuim and mitzvahs. But nevertheless, Pinchas ben Yoyer. Pinchas ben Yoyer would not eat stuff which wasn't the Chumas and Mice weren't taken off from, because it took on the character of its owner. And so too by Noach, all the species which were in the ark, he fed them. Now we assume they're from his neshama. They're integrally connected to him. That's what Chazal say they did not mess up in the teva, because why did they not mess up? They're animals. If they're subject to messing up, they're just animals. How can they not mess up? So it says in Tzadok, even though theoretically they could have messed up, like all the other animals in the world which messed up and had mated with species which weren't their species. No, once Noach acquired them and Noach was a tzaddik, that Tzidkas also devolved on the animals he had with him in the teva. And they also didn't mess up. And it says the wife of a Tam B'Chacham is like a Tam B'Chacham. In other words, that's halacha too. If the husband is trusted on Tum and Tara, on matters of Tum and Tara, so the wife is also trusted in matters of Tum and Tara. So the opposite is true as well. This is the famous Gemara. It says that there was a woman who was married in her first marriage to a Talmid Chacham, and she tied on to him his tefillin. and then they died, married a second person, second husband, who was a tax collector. She tied on his arm the signs he used to use, the seals he used to use in order to collect the taxes. So symbolism of Gemara is that a person's spouse, and certainly back then when the wives were more subservient to their husbands, they were more influenced by their husbands. They were influenced by the husband's personality, and the husband's personality was a good one. The wife's personality was a good one and a righteous one. The husband's personality was not a righteous one, so the wife's personality was not a righteous one. So it goes even, says it's Tzadok even as a wife. And again, I think it works the other way as well, especially as man as that, when women are more assertive, more they have their own way of living and their own perspective. So then also they, as we know, can influence their husbands as well. And it goes, of course, I'm saying that children are also influenced by the parent in a similar way. Which goes to Rambara Pasuk Shorish Poret. And we studied that Ramban before, that characteristics of the fathers impact the children both in a positive and negative way. Shorish Poret means sometimes there's a root which goes wild because there was some impurity, so to speak, in the parent. So that causes an impurity in the child. So a lot of times, I don't think it's. I need to repeat this many times. I'm going to repeat it again. It doesn't mean that the child or the wife or whoever it is doesn't have their own free will, and they're going to be judged on their own free will. It's just like everybody can be influenced, and if somebody is under your direct connection, such as a wife or a child, they're going to be influenced more, and it's an influence which is both overt, right? You can see it, and covert underneath the surface. And according to Tzaddik, it's also mystical influence. The father causes merit for the son. Surprising influence. Ben Russia, and if the son is the Russia, then there was some shortcoming in the father. So that is again the coming comes out the character traits of the father comes out in the child. Zel Pokeda Bonavos. And this is the shot in that which actually we had this week's yesterday's Parsha Shlach, that Hashem visits the sins of the fathers on the children. How could that be? It's not fair, right? The true father sins. Why should the children suffer? But the answer is that it's not it's not that the sins of the father are visited on the children, the specific sins, but the father has sinned, so those sins are part of his character trait, and that gets passed on to his children who are in his sphere of influence. From when they follow the patterns of behavior set by their father. So again, one way of understanding that is that it's a educational type of thing. In other words, the father educates the son. Father has flaws. The son's educated in those way, which includes those flaws. But the way Reb Tzaddik is a more mystical thing. But that the father has flaws, which then, because they're character traits, become connected in the spiritual DNA of the son. Often Abbas Mamish. It's really there, the sins of the father, which are absorbed into the child. It's not beyond letter law. It's not, so to speak, unfair, because that is whether they respond or not. It's a trait which they absorb, and it has to be purified by HaKadosh Baruch Hu's purification processes. So this is a psalus ba'av hane'elam, which is hidden for the rest of us, but it came out. And so too says Tzaddik, amazing statements. End of this piece. He says, you can understand a person by looking at the things that he owns. What a person owns, how the things he owns manifest themselves, how perhaps even they conduct themselves, how these things make an impression on you. Tells you something about the owner. You can understand the owner from the things he owns. And that's why we understand why Yaakov Avinu went back for Pachitz Ketani, for small vessels, which left on the other side of the river, and then he got into the fight with Esau's mouth. And Chazal say, Tzaddikim, Mamonos, Levi, I think Tzaddik himself says it somewhere. He said that Tzaddikim, their money is more precious than their body. Why? Because they're given a possession. Even Pachitani, even small pots, in small jars, or then Kodesh Baruch Hu gave them for a reason, because their tchunas hanevesh, their character trait, is supposed to have an influence and connect to this small jar and uplift it and use the Shem Shemaim and make a Kiddush Hashem out of it. So if it's worthwhile for Yaakov to go back in order to give him this thing which Kodesh Baruch Hu gave him for safekeeping, and want him to have an influence with it in order that it should be used properly in the future. That's why he went back. Okay, it's a very fundamental piece. Pei Zayin also, I think, 87 is also a fundamental piece. So it's an amazing statement also. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes a decree against a generation, even a negative decree, the Tzaddikim generation have to agree. The Tzaddikim, now, there are two levels of understanding this. I heard once that, and the name, I believe, I forget, I think it was Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that when you come into Shamayim, that you're judged by the Tzaddikim of your generation who passed away recently, because only they can understand you. Right? Because if you were judged by Tzaddikim of the generations earlier, then they wouldn't understand you. Every generation, somebody who died, only somebody died recently can understand that generation, and only they can judge them appropriately. But he's not, I don't think he's talking here about that tzaddikim, and not talking about the din of a person. He's talking about Xera on a generation. And the people, the Gedolim were alive. The Tzaddikim Ador are generally alive. Which because of each Rabbah, like it says, each Rabbah, which is part of the Zohar, Kufman base on base. So Hashem Lireav, the secret of the Kosh Baruch Hu is to his, those who fear him. Va'ad lo eskimo, until they agree, lo nachtin din l'alma, the judgment does not come down to the world. So if Echi is, how could this possibly be? Haloim Adram, Spalim Badam, they're davening. They're saying, we don't want bad things to happen for the generation. You know, how can you say it's Askamas Gedolei Ador? How would they ever agree to such a thing? It's madness. They're not going to agree to it. So he says, Rakshmina Acher Adoimelo. You understand? It's like in a way which is similar. In other words, they don't consent directly to the decree. Of course, they never would. They wouldn't consent to Persia attacks Eretz Yisrael. Why would they have anybody consent that? It's crazy, right? No, their consent comes in a way which is similar, but different but similar. Like David Melch, the Nasa Navi came to him and he said, what happens if a rich person steals a poor person's lamb? So David Melch says, should be put to death, which was not the actual judgment, but that was he said. This is where they put to death. And then David HaMelech was punished as a result of his child from Bathsheba died because he was masking, even though he wasn't masking directly. Nasa Navi asked David directly, should your child die from your relationship with Bathsheba? David said, of course not. It's not the way it works. It works indirectly. David would agree through the mashal that the person who stole the lamb should be punished, so therefore he was punished as well. In other words, that the people on Nossos were bad, wicked people; they had to be punished. Yirmiyahu was daven; they should be punished, but he didn't necessarily daven; they should be punished the way they were punished, which was by total annihilation, whatever it was back then. I don't remember exactly, but that was the same principle. You daven; they should be punished for something they did wrong, and that's Haskama. The ghost that says the Shvatim, the same thing as the ghost that says Shvatim, Hayeshaya, and I'm sorry, no, Bnei the ghost that says Shvatim both Yirmiyahu, and but Yirmiyahu Bnei the ghost that says Shvatim, and Hayeshaya b'Shavna, and Shavna was a bad person. Time Yeshaya somehow davened that he should be saved from Shavna, and then Shavna was destroyed. Avram made him a stone. And he says, even Avram Avinu agreed to the destruction of stone. What are you talking about? Avram Avinu, the davening stone should not be destroyed. So where is his consent to this? Where did he agree with this? Where did he act as Beis HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Wow, amazing. Now, would she let Lot go? It's a stone. In essence, he was saying, okay, what can I do? You want to go join the Shem? Go ahead. You should know that, Avram Avinu didn't say this. But you should know that it's a very bad place to be. But nevertheless, he let Lilo go, and evidently, somehow or other, he was affirming that this Gzardin should eventually occur. Later I tried to stop it, but he already agreed, which is an amazing statement by Tzadok. I don't know if I really understand it. But he says all these cases, it's not that Tzaddikim say yes directly. So let's say in this case of the war against Iran, right? So it's hard to say this, but it could be that since the Tzaddikim came along and said, well, we're upset at the Israeli government because they want to draft Yeshiva Bachrim, even though they didn't have in mind they should start a war. somehow it started a war because they were assuming that, okay, they're going to be wars. And we don't want Yeshiva to be drafted, but the assumption is going to be wars. I have no idea if that's true, but along that line is what I'm trying to say. Therefore, he says, there's a big important lesson for this. Therefore, you always have to be careful not to let anything bad escape your mouth because it could be that's what Kodesh Baruch Hu was waiting for. You, the tzaddik, should say something wrong, and that will allow him to Chas v'Shalom bring a gzeira. Therefore, tzaddik is also included in the punishment generation because he, even unknowingly, perhaps, he let it happen. And together with the leaves, the cabbage gets damaged as well. In other words, what's the cabbage's fault? That something's wrong with the leaves? No, he had they had some connection to it. Everything is with justice. Rakshu canal, because like we said, it's because he agreed. For ground put somebody caused their affliction to occur, it starts from him. Okay, the tzaddik goes first. It says tzaddik nitfas b'avanador, and he goes first. So it's K'inim Mida Teva. It's similar to Mida Teva. If you daven for your friend, you answer first. You get the positive because we give you credit for davening for your friend. Therefore, you get answer first. And so too, if you inadvertently, unfortunately, say something which causes your friend to suffer, you suffer first. That's why normally understand tzaddik dies first when bad things happen, so he won't see the rest of the bad stuff. We don't have to suffer through it. But the tzaddik say a different spin on it. He's saying that tzaddik's killed first because he brought it about. No tzaddik was ever saved from this completely. Because there's no tzaddik who never stumbled and made a mistake. Because we see even Avraham Avinu, according to this, made a mistake. So everybody made mistakes and caused that damage and caused the bad things to happen. But Mashiach, only Mashiach won't have that. It says no room to expand this because it's stunning enough as is. But it relates to the previous piece. But just like you, every person, his character, his traits, his activity manifests in those things which are connected to him. So too, things which occur to Am Yisrael are manifestations, are results of that which the tzaddik does or that which the tzaddik says. And even just like here, even if the tzaddik is not aware of it, he can cause bad things to happen. Certainly good things to happen as well. Like Tzadok said, Mida Tova is better. So too, the influence a person has on things which he possesses, controls, comes in contact with, also is not necessarily direct. It can happen as a result of the ramifications of the things that he's doing or thinking or saying. Okay, so everybody's very careful, doubly and triply careful to do the right thing and not the wrong thing, and say the right thing, not the wrong thing, because the influence it can have on others and on the system. All right, very good. Nice pieces today. Have a good week.